So I think I'm going into the fourth 14-hour day working on this new project, and I'm doing surprisingly well for all that. But there's some cool stuff that I'm doing, especially when it comes to tooling, and I wanted to share this with everybody because one of the things that I always talk about is that, you know, having practice in things and practical skill is important as a smith. But your most valuable weapon is, as a smith, is never going to be that. It's going to be figuring crap out. You know, I talk about, you know, how you process, information. I've spoken about, blacksmith's epistemology, how you know what you know, how you figure out what's right and what's wrong. And this right here is your most potent weapon. So, but the thing is that, it's very easy for us to forget that somebody figured out the problem that you have. We're not special. It's been done for 2,000 years. Blacksmiths have been figuring out what the hell is going on. Somebody figured it out already. And there's got to be, the disconnect is, when you're in school and you're learning things like geometry and everything else, there's no connection between how do I use this crap to solve problems. So this is one of the wild things because I'm going to show you some stick technology here that's pretty amazing. So here's the problem. I'm making a bunch of these dishes. This is 16 gauge. They are 30-inch bowls. Okay, that is a lot to dish. A lot to dish. Most of the time, stuff like this is done on a metal spinning lathe. And I called around to try to actually find a place to do this. The lead time was 10 weeks. The minimum tooling charge was $3,000. And I think they would have still been a couple $100 a piece very easily. So now there is no way that I have a strong enough arm to dish all of those in any amount of time. So that means we've got to use power tools. And that comes to our power hammer. So now if you are a power hammer enthusiast, I must beg your forgiveness because I'm about to hurt your feelings. All right, the good news is that these hammer dies are just mild steel. These were a pair of practice dies that I did when I was setting up the power hammer to learn how to mill these guys out. So if you're cringing, this is not 813, this is just mild steel. But I needed a dish. So we're gonna start here with this piece of poo-poo. So I needed a dish, and now in all the time that I've done armor and work, one of the handiest dishes is the bottom end of an oxygen cylinder. So if you see over there in the corner, there's an oxygen cylinder. If you flip that bad boy over, it actually has a depression in the bottom, really heavy stuff. So you can see this is an oxygen tank that's been cut. Well, of course, it was too big to fit on the die, so I glue a piece of 1/2 inch by 4 inch flat bar to the die, and then glue this to that, okay? So the problem is that the hole down in here is really steep. It was making too much of a dish. So what we did is we took a piece of 1/8 of an inch sheet metal, 11 gauge, popped it on top, and stomped it down. Now the problem is this is what we call almost a bottomless die because there's no bottom contour. It's just basically using the presser foot, which by the way, I made the presser foot by welding a piece of 2-inch shaft to the face of the die. This is a piece of 1/2 inch plate cut into a circle, heated it up in the forge, dropped it in place and turned the power hammer on and said mush, 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 mush. Cut the power hammer off, let the hammerhead seat into it, and then welded all of this in place. Now that's the other thing. I had to run the welder over here. All of this to actually make sure that it fit correctly is welded into place. Okay, now, so here's the issue, is that this guy being kind of a bottomless die, it can go too deep. So sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. So my buddy Mike had this brilliant idea of we cut a couple different of these pieces. Again, just pieces of shafting. Now that one's a little small because I didn't have any 2.5. But that acts as a bottom. So when you're trying to actually keep the edge from crimping, this prevents it from going too deep and bending it too much. And I made a couple different sizes of that. And it takes me about 30 or 45 minutes to make one of these guys. Now, the depth of my hammer is a little bit of a problem. You can see that right here in the middle, it's not completely dished because my hammer really only can get up into there. But you can see we have a very nice radius. Now, one of the other problems, though, the reason it takes me so long on this end of it is because those dies are kind of free-form dies, right? I can make, let me show you, I can make a much tighter bowl. I think I showed you guys this on the thing the other day. If I were just to bottom this out, this is the radius that that guy produces. And that's a problem, but, you know, because I have to be very careful, because if I sneeze, I can overbend it and cause a problem. So what I need is I need a set of dies that match that radius out there. That's what I need. But you're talking about, you know, precision work. You've got to have a very slight curvature, and it's got to be accurate. So how do you do that in this shop? You know, I don't have CNC machines in here, and even though I've got a lathe out there, there's still the problem of how do you get the correct radius? How do you even measure the radius? Well, let me show you how we do it on a ditch budget. Okay. So this is the stick. If you have not seen one of these, they are very handy. I think this is poplar. Now, I'm going to try to gauge one central point, hopefully in line with the middle here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this stick left to right. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find where my hand sets, that when I turn this, that it closely matches the radius of the bowl. So see, I'm too close there. I'm going to come back a little bit more. Still catching. And again, this is all still very close. That right there is very close. As I turn it from a central pivot point, that's a radius. And guess what? You can see that I've marked it right there. Okay. Here's the fun part. So I had a plug of steel. This was actually a punch plug of 4-inch steel. Right here, okay? It's a piece of shafting. It's still very hot. All right, so here's what's going to happen. I raise this up by an inch. I put me an inch spacer right here, and I weld this guy. Now again, I've marked this out so that this is square, okay? So we're going to put this guy, somehow I've glued a pencil to it. I'm going to take this guy. It's going to go in here. And what I do is, again, is I square this up, and I put a tack weld in so that this is square and level to this guy right here, okay? I mark the middle point of this, and there should be a corresponding mark right here to that piece. Now, how do we grind the radius? This is fun. So what I'm going to do is I've got my measurement here. I know that the radius starts here. That's the pivot point, and that's where it is there. So now I'm going to come in about right here, and you can see that's right there is the radius. So you can see, now this is a little out of place, but you can see that is what makes the radius, okay? So I'm going to take my grinder. Now I have to do this one hand, so I'm not exactly going to have it right. But I take my locking pliers here. It is now locked in. It's not going to pull forward. So now I can take my grinder, and it acts as a cutting pendulum. So I can very accurately cut a radius into that surface. Now, is it perfect? Probably not, but it's damn close, and it's going to be good enough for government work. So that's the bottom. What we're going to do now is we'll take a piece of 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch plate, heat it up, set it on top, and using a wide hammer, press it down to conform to this space. And then we weld them up to new hammer dies, and then we have a perfectly spaced and perfectly sized set of dies. Now, the question is I've got a bunch of these guys done, and this is something you're always going to run into when you're in the shop, is you have to figure out when is it appropriate to do tooling and jigs, right? Because it could take you easily an entire day just to run tooling. And if you've only got 3 of the things to do, sometimes it's better just to use what you've got and get the product out. But that's always a fight you're going to have, and that's kind of a conversation for a different time. The real point that I'm pushing here is that with a stick and some clamps, you can grind an almost perfect radius on something that's only 4 inches wide. And if you've got things you want to match, now I did these freehand, but that gave me the pattern to match to. And even though that's relatively close, that's going to be good enough for government work. But that's where the geometry comes in. You know, that's where there's practical application of how in God's name do I get this to grind the right way. So anyway, I am going to have a glass of tea, and I'm going to wash my hands, and then I'm going to get ready for the night shift. So guys, again, I'll be back filming the good stuff here shortly. As soon as this project is done, I'm moving very quickly, so it ought to be cool stuff. Anyway, you guys be good, and I'll talk to you later.